Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar From Spreadsheets to Smarter S&OP. We are excited to have you all here today to talk about the challenges many manufacturers face in terms of how to move beyond the limitations of spreadsheets and truly drive user adoption of a powerful platform like Salesforce Manufacturing Cloud. I'm Madhuram, I'm the host, and I'm thrilled to join by our expert speakers today. We have Anandi Narayanan, who leads the strategy and transformation for manufacturing at TELUS Digital, with Jared Casper, VP of Sales at Valorx. So over the next 30 minutes, Anandi and Jared will share about a customer story, some practical strategies, and real insights to help you bridge the gap between these Salesforce, S&OP, and the spreadsheet systems, and how you can combine and create a simple and a better user experience for your users. So with that, I'll just quickly share to Jared to begin the session. Yeah, Jared.
Thank you, Maddie, and hi, everybody, whether you're live or listening to this recording. For those of you not familiar with Valorx, we are an ISV partner. We have a couple different solutions listed on Salesforce's App Exchange, and really, we'll get into the specifics in detail. We help our clients with usability of Salesforce. I know that's a very broad statement, but we will get into some details soon. As Maddie mentioned, I'm joined here with Anandi. Anandi, do you want to just quickly explain what TELUS Digital does and what you guys focus on, and then we'll jump into it?
Absolutely, and thanks everybody. So my name is Anandi, work at TELUS Digital. We are a Salesforce implementation partner, amongst many things. I work within the Salesforce practice, leading our efforts within what I would call supply chain. So manufacturing and distribution fall squarely within there. And excited to be here with Jarrett because I think sales operations planning is a pivotal question to a lot of our customers, a pivotal pain point. And I think Valorx provides a really great solution to help build on top of the platform.
Great, thank you for that. So if we just kind of take a step back and we think about Salesforce over the past 2.5 decades, I think we can all agree that it's no longer just a CRM. It's the backbone for a lot of very complex processes, and it's only getting more and more complex. And if you think specifically within manufacturing, and you can see some logos up here today, we're talking about really large organizations, companies like BP and Bosch, Qualcomm, just to name a few, and they're managing their global operations on Salesforce. The reality, though, is, and I think we can all relate to this, is getting your teams to actually use Salesforce for these complex processes. Specifically when we talk about sales and operations planning, forecasting, demand planning, it's almost the same challenge we've had now for the past decade of how do we get our users to be comfortable and want to adopt the system. And if you think about it from their side of things, right, they make huge investments in Salesforce. You plan on bringing any number of users, right? It could be hundreds, thousands of users. And the goal is, one single source of truth. And, a lot of times IT departments are thrilled, they're excited, they bring in the security, but the end users are the ones who sometimes suffer with the usability of these systems. A lot of times they're coming from spreadsheets, right? They're coming from legacy systems where they love the speed and flexibility. But we all know that data really should not be residing in spreadsheets anymore, but it's really tough to beat the usability of a spreadsheet, especially, when we're thinking about finance team and operations teams when they're looking at huge amounts of data sets. And it's not as simple as just like, hey, I want to make a change to a bunch of data, right? I want to be able to model different kind of scenarios. I want to look at market data. I want to look at historical data. I want to look at pipeline data. You want to take all these data points and put it into an interface to be able to do manipulation at the end of the day, but do kind of that modeling as well. And what ends up happening, at least in our experiences, we see a lot of users, because Salesforce can be rigid at times from a usability standpoint, they drift back to Excel or they drift out of the system. And so now this system that you put in place for your thousands of users, people are not logging in. You have administrators that are logging in that are swivel chairing and typing things in two different places. And kind of that goal of a single source of truth is not there, right? So how do we fix this? We're going to get into a specific example. We're going to look at Qualcomm, who's a customer of ours, and look at how they solve this and had a real challenge like this. But maybe before I even do that, I'd love Anandi, right? We're going to get into Qualcomm, but I don't think this is unique to just them. I think you probably see this challenge as well. But Why do you think companies are struggling getting their teams to adopt Salesforce when we think of demand planning and sales and operations planning? And like, how do we start closing that gap?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, first, I think it's really important for everybody listening or attending today to understand, Manufacturing Cloud was born outside of Sales Cloud to be that extension. So there's a data model extension within Manufacturing Cloud to capture the demand post-win. And first, I don't know that a lot of people have really taken advantage of that critical piece of digitization because you have to then connect the sales process to operations processes. And for most people who've lived in this world, that connection has been exactly what you said, Jared. It's a spreadsheet. No one's really recognized that I can take pipeline. I can then say if something has closed won, I can manage and maintain and monitor the market demand digitally and then consume that by downstream functions. And if you don't do that, then you pivot to spreadsheets as your way of gathering the inputs from the various players to support your S&IOP process. So the first step is, making sure you use the platform for where the platform needs to be used. And then secondly, it's about the experiences because when I'm a seller, if I'm myopically focused in a specific account, I might update a record or a specific detail of an account. But if I'm also responsible for a territory that might have many accounts, or maybe I've closed a lot of business with an account and there's copious amounts of information, this is again where experiences that are like spreadsheet, like where I want to see many layers of that information all in one place and I want to update it fast. I need that usability. Sellers have a bit of a paradox, right? They have to close new business. That's really, really important. But we also need them to be the guiding light for where the market is shifting or how demand might be realized. When we closed the business, we thought it was going to be realized in a certain way. But in reality, that's changing. And I need that market insight to support operations and to support finance. So this problem exists in every subvertical within manufacturing. I know we're going to talk about Qualcomm, and that's exciting, and they sit within the high-tech space and as a chipset manufacturer. But you can think of other high-tech companies that make maybe data centers or electronics. Totally a boom right now with the AI world, right? And they're dealing with transactional orders that they need to manage for distribution, but they also need to deal with those longer term wins with hyperscalers. How do you couple those two pieces together? And then operations then needs to marry variation or configuration. Or from a chemical manufacturer, maybe I make an additive product that's used in two very different markets, a steady state market like food, plus also in building materials or construction. How do I deal with those two sort of very different demand profiles for the exact same additive? And then now, again, the variation that might exist. Maybe it's a packaging variation. Maybe it's a unit of measurement variation. Maybe it's a purity level variation. That's what operations is contending with. And they need that, again, that demand signal from the seller to tell them, hey, this additive we're selling more of or less of in this particular period of time. Or I'm in construction and building products. Maybe I make HVAC units. Maybe I make pipes. Maybe I make couplers. And again, my demand is both tied to a distributor or a contractor, or someone who's buying stuff transactionally, or a retailer. It's also tied to big project business. Maybe we're, building a new hospital out in Jersey, and my particular product is going to be used in that. And we all know how construction works, even in our own personal lives. We can't control the schedule. Things might move up, things might move down. In operations, I need to consolidate all of that, and I need to, again, manage that demand variability. Or OEM products in automotive or industrial, where I'm being designed in. So I make a product that goes into the next model or trim level of a Toyota or a Honda. I'm now tied to that end use market demand that continuously fluctuates. And I have to manage and maintain that. So just being awarded the business was phenomenal, but now realizing the business is a whole other game. So I would say in every single one of these case scenarios, what we're all dealing with is demand is chasing faster than most organizations can react to. And we need to help sales in a simple way, and that's what I'm most excited about. Keep everyone informed about those market shifts so that operations can update, translate that into SKUs, variants, and we're going to see that with Qualcomm, right? To drive capacity plans in a particular factory. And let's not forget finance, right? Finance is so important because none of this happens if we don't make money. And finance needs all of this information to drive outlooks. not only for production planning, but investor relations, especially, with the slide you showed previously of those organizations. Most of them are publicly traded. It's so important for us to be able to make financial commitments and have confidence in those numbers. And so tying all of this together is super important, and digitizing it is even more important today than ever before.
You hit on so many great points. I think I'm realizing you have an endless supply of use cases, customer stories, which is amazing. And I think everyone, hopefully you realize through that, little kind of session is, every industry that is trying to do this demand planning and forecasting is struggling with similar things. And I like the example Anandi mentioned of keep it simple, right? We sometimes get fatigued on, our end users using the system and pushing them into a system. And sometimes, yes, this is a multi-step process, but sometimes it's keeping it very simple for our end users to help save them time, help just drive better adoption. And we're going to get into some of those examples. And I think we're going to actually take a look at the product and see some of those examples live. So thank you, Anandi, for that. So that brings us to our story of Qualcomm. And I think, again, most people are probably familiar with the organization. They're, a very large chip manufacturer, and their business, like a lot of companies, is incredibly complex. You're seeing a number up there. They do have tens of thousands of Salesforce licenses. But when we think specifically of this demand planning process, they have around 1,000 users that are trying to do this design pipeline and forecasting process. And even a company with this level of sophistication, they're facing the exact same challenges that we're discussing right now, right? There's a major disconnect between the data living in Salesforce and the teams actually running the operations. And there's a lot of, let's open the forecasting for this month, and a lot of swivel chairing, a lot of where's the latest data, going into other systems and finding other attribute information, consolidating it into a single spreadsheet, emailing those spreadsheets around, getting inputs from other users. A lot of lost time, right? And, more importantly, again, Nandi mentioned this, right? This is critical information for most publicly traded companies that they're reporting to the streets. So let's actually dig into some of the challenges, if we can jump to the next slide. So the challenge was kind of, again, specifically for us, into two different things, right? Design pipeline and chipset forecasting. And one of the big things that we realized when we started looking at the end users and what they were doing monthly is they were responsible for working across, hundreds of accounts, sometimes thousands of opportunities, with tons of attributes. And the revenue planning around this just meant that you were clicking from record to record. And again, they were leveraging systems outside Salesforce. And so there was a lot of time that was just being spent on these type of tasks. And if you specifically get into, on the right-hand side where you see product transition, chipset cloning. So what that means is, in this specific example, and again, not everyone's going to have this, it refers to the process of migrating from one product version to another, or from an older generation chip to a newer generation chip, like very common for organizations like this. And a better example could be, you're moving a customer, you're moving their forecasts, you're moving their design and opportunities from an older chipset to the next generation replacement. And a lot of times what ends up having to happen is, you're doing a mapping relationship. So you're taking an old product, let's say chip A, and saying this is now chip B. You're reassigning your forecast and your opportunities and your bill of material. You're validating some of the dependencies, and you're communicating, right, across internal teams. Sometimes you're communicating with your customer and partner as well. And again, this is back to that multi-step process, where this was taking Qualcomm hours, right? You can see right there, 3 to 5 hours per product transition, hundreds of these being performed a month. And you can imagine the amount of time that it took an organization to do this. So if we get to the solution, right, there's two components of this. There's the design pipeline and the chipset manufacturing forecasting. The first thing that we did is, and this again is where a company like TELUS Digital can help as well, we simplified their Salesforce, right? Everybody can kind of look at Salesforce, and there's a lot of fields, a lot of record types. So the first thing was kind of simplifying what they were doing in Salesforce and what data they needed to capture. Then we rolled out, our pipeline templates. And you're going to see this in the example when I show the product, right? Instead of clicking one by one, they're able to pull in hundreds, if not thousands, of records into a very familiar familiar interface, something that they're comfortable in, they're used to using. So change management was very minimal. But again, everything lives and breathes in Salesforce. And so with a single click, they were able to do all their modeling and manipulating of a lot of data. And really what this did is it kind of brought that speed and flexibility of spreadsheets into Salesforce, but it kept all the data governed and inside Salesforce at the same time. And then if we get into kind of the forecasting side of things, so what we did is we migrated off an old system that was not in Salesforce. We brought it all into one platform, which in Salesforce in this case, we built an interface for them as well to do all their planning inputs in real time across different departments. And the result is that this product transition chipset cloning that used to take hours is down to minutes. So it completely removed kind of that offline work, the swivel chairing that I was mentioning earlier, and it really brought the power of Salesforce and the usability of Excel together. And what it allowed them to do is get that full visibility, right? Better analysis, one source of truth. And again, that time saving was huge. I go back to what Anandi mentioned earlier, time saving is great. And again, these are data points that they've provided. I think they said around 10,000 hours for product transition, 7,000 hours for chipset creation. And this is just in 1 year. But if you think about the actual data, right, and why they started this initiative to begin with, it was about being able to more accurately forecast and predict their demand and planning in the future so that they could report these numbers. Again, this is what's shaping investors' expectations, right? This is as critical as it gets. And Anandi kind of mentioned that as well. Let's move on to a next slide in here. So we're going to take a look at a product demonstration. And, just for the sake of today's example, we're going to show a couple different personas. We're going to show what it looks like as a seller, maybe in operations and finance. Again, there could be other team members or departments that are involved in this process. Everyone's kind of thinking about the data slightly different, right? Some roles, and that's what they should be doing. A seller is not thinking of maybe kind of some of the financial goals as a company. The operations team may be looking at, I want to aggregate demand by a product or a region or by a variant. If I'm a seller, a lot of times I'm trying to do kind of the very beginning part of, I have my book of business. I may be wanting to look at a specific account or products across accounts, and I want to be able to do something like forecast the quantity, right? And be able to do this really quick and easy because, again, this is usually a very repetitive and a very much every single month, I need to be doing this as we open up our forecast period. And I need to kind of start looking at what actually happened in the previous month, as well as kind of plan sometimes 6 months out. If you think of kind of automotive industry, sometimes as far as 10 years out. So you're really looking at large data sets and trying to give users I call it a quick and easy way of doing this, but it's a quick and easy way for a complex process, right? So there's a lot that goes around this. So I'm going to jump into the demonstration, but Anandi, anything that you wanted to add regarding just kind of the different personas that you see? I listed a couple seller, operations, finance that are involved in this process that we should be thinking about.
Yeah. So love how you set the stage. And yes, I think we should start with the seller's point of view. We're going to land into Salesforce and really want to begin the journey there because the seller is doing a lot of work in Salesforce. They're working on opportunities that have yet to be closed won. They're closing deals and having to, as we talk about, manage and maintain and have a visibility to the demand profile after the business has been closed won and decide if the distribution is going to change at all with their customer. And that's an important place to anchor because that's where it all begins. And that's where the repetitive conversations me as a seller have with my manager, maybe as I'm doing weekly pipeline calls, maybe as I'm account planning, maybe as I'm picking up the call and talking to my customer and wanting to shape how we're going to be growing our business together. I need that very, very specific view of my account. And so here, I know, Jarrett, you're going to show us how me as a seller can take a look at my particular account. And then how do I zoom out, Jared? So like I've done this, I've done my daily sort of activity, but now I have to get into that monthly cycle. And this is where, me as a seller, I'm a little nervous now because there's a lot of data to be consumed and a lot of data to be manipulated. And how do I sort of zoom out and take a look at everything in my territory and do the thing that everyone's looking for me to do? Update that demand signal, give it my best guess so that everybody else downstream can do their work effectively.
Definitely. So I'm sharing my screen right now, and hopefully it's not too distracting. I'm looking at a second monitor, but what we're looking at, again, what Anandi mentioned, is I'm inside of a sales agreement, right? And if we think of a sales agreement, right, it is a long-term negotiated contract that you have with your customer, right? It details things like the product, the quantity, pricing, future sales, and it helps kind of show your run rate of business, providing visibility into what you planned as well as your actual sales. Now, a lot of times in reality, actual sales and what's actually happening, a lot of times there's an integration to an ERP system, which could be coming weekly, monthly, whatever frequency you need. That's coming in here as well. Because as a seller, right, I may have planned this with a customer with this sales agreement, but what actually ends up happening, the reality is very different, right? Things change pretty frequently, and we need to be able to visualize that data and show it to a user to be able to make future decisions. Other important thing, again, is pipeline data, right? I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but that is a critical part of how we forecast, right? We want to look at open opportunities that we're working on with our customers and be able to look at that data and how it may be taking historical data, our current pipeline data, as well as maybe a third of looking at market data. And that gives us kind of the reality of how to predict or project future. Again, you're looking at a sales agreement right now, and if I scroll to the bottom, we can see that we're looking at a specific sales agreement for an account. This has 2 products on it. And, we're looking at a handful of months. Now, depending on how you want to kind of set this up, and this is where I'll get into the Valorx interface in a second, a lot of times our end users, our sellers, are tasked with going from sales agreement to sales agreement or from account to account and going into their products. And again, if I'm working on 10 or 100 different sales agreements, it can be a very tedious process. I may be sitting on a call with my manager. We may be thinking about how do we take a specific product, how do we get it plugged into an account, or how do we look at what's already been sold and how do we upsell it, or how do we kind of plan our quantity out for the future months. And a lot of times, some of our future months are set by that historical data. So I'm tasked with coming into this screen and doing my manipulation, which you can do through this native UI that you're seeing right here. Where Valorx comes in, and I'm going to kind of show a couple different screens today, is, this is a grid that we've developed as a company, and it's embedded as a Lightning web page component. One of the things that you can do is you can work on many to many. Right? So what I'm showing on the left-hand side, and again, I'm on a bigger monitor, so hopefully I'm not too zoomed in, but you can zoom out and have more data in here, is I'm seeing multiple customers with multiple sales agreements, right? So we're already in that many to many relationship, and we're already looking across lots of records. And every user, and even within groups, they want to visualize the data slightly different, right? So my business unit, I may want to have less columns or more columns. And the hard part about it is, how do you build a UI that everybody's happy with? The answer is you really can't. Everyone wants to look at data slightly different. So if you notice, right, there is no coding behind this, right? Your business users, if you want, or IT can own this, you can deploy this and make it very easy and straightforward for end users to be able to add whatever attribute information they want. And then if I draw your attention to the data on the right, depending on how you're forecasting, right? It could be at a weekly level, could be at a monthly level, quarterly, yearly, could be a combination of all, right? If you think of telescoping, right? I know that for the next 6 months or 6 periods, I'm going to forecast at a monthly level. And then once we get past that, I don't have that type of granular insight. I'm going to jump up to a quarterly level. Then I may go up to an annual level, and everybody's different. The nice thing about it is you can define this, but then you can let your users customize and dynamically change this. So I could say, today I want to look 6 months, then 6 quarters. Tomorrow I may want to look 12 months and 12 quarters. I may want to look at the previous month or the previous 6 months or 12 months in historical data. So you can dynamically build these interfaces, again, without any code. And one of the things that I love showing people is, it's great to have lots of data, right? In this example, what I'm doing is showing more measures, right? So for that particular month, which in this case is October, I can see my planned quantity. My actual quantity, a lot of times, again, is coming in from my ERP system. I can see my sales price, but there's times where I just don't want, I call it noise. I just want to see kind of a basic bare bone of show me all of my planned quantity per product, per sales agreement, per account in this visualization. And you can see as I scroll to the right, as I get to that 6 month, it jumps up to a quarterly view. And what we're doing behind the scenes is, even though we've set up the system to be monthly forecasting, we are aggregating and disaggregating the data. So in this case, it's 3 months that make up a quarter. And you can define again how you want to spread that data out, if it's evenly spread or it's based on some logic. And as I scroll to the right, again, you're seeing quarters and quarters and quarters, and then it goes up to a yearly view, right? And one of the things that you can do in any Valorx UI, right? I can come in here. I always tell people it's hard to show people in a demo of like me navigating with my arrow keys because you can't really see my keyboard, but just simple things of tabbing, enter, control copy, control paste, doing something like dragging these values across, and you get a lot of that Excel-like capability, right? So I can see below, as I hover over a subset of data, you're counting 4, you have a sum of 800, an average of 2. And at any point in time, I can click save, and all this is real time. You can update hundreds, if not thousands of records in a matter of seconds through this interface. And again, you can define what this interface looks like. You could have an interface specific for a seller, specific for your finance team, specific for operations. Again, everything's revolving around Salesforce. So there is no, Jarrett, send me the latest spreadsheet. I need to put it into my spreadsheet, right? I may come into an interface like this that's different than my seller, but I'm looking at the latest and greatest data as well. We are going to jump into some more complexity. Anandi, I wanted to see if you wanted to add anything kind of to what I'm showing so far.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, I know we only have about 4 more minutes left. So I wanted to be able to jump into perhaps one of those other personas, whether we want to take an ops persona or a finance persona, and just how, again, I can look at the data from a different point of view. Now I want to maybe see a point of view that says aggregate all the products. I don't really care about the customer. I just care about my products because I got a now demand plan. And I don't care about the product at the level that the seller actually updated demand. I need to see variation. Variations could be unit of measure, it could be color, it could be a form factor. I need to see that sort of attribute variation. How can I come and do that? And then perhaps just like Excel, do a little bit of the what if stuff on the side of my desk. Do that in Excel.
Yep, no, I love it. So I am quickly, as Anandi is speaking, because I know we are getting close to time, I'm showing you now this through a different visualization, right? And you're seeing how quickly as a user, I drilled into a product and said, I just want to see this product, which is across multiple accounts. I want to create some on-the-fly ad hoc formulas that I'm comfortable doing. And you can see I'm now looking at what the average is per month, per product across these companies. And I can now look at, let's say, my current month and the next +2, and I could do something like, and again, I'll actually delete this and show it to you. I could say, I want to do an average of this data, and I want to multiply it by a 10% increase. And then I want to come in here and drag these values down. So you can leverage the capabilities of what Excel is really great at, this modeling and what if. Like, I am not committing my data, pushing data yet. I'm doing all of my scenario planning. And I could do this at, as Anandi mentioned, a business unit level, at a product group level, at a product family level, across customers. I could do my kind of napkin math on the side, above, wherever I would like. I can use that logic. I could be pulling in market data as well. I could use that data to now manipulate further information. And even though I'm looking at the data in a very different interface than what I was just showing previously, everything is coming and going to Salesforce. So if I want to work here and not natively, let's say in our Salesforce UI, but want to work in Excel UI, Valorx is taking care of that communication to make sure the data only resides in one place. Again, there's none of that swivel chairing of emailing things around. And again, depending on if I'm in finance or in a different group, I'll just kind of flash one more screen in here. I know we're low on time, where I'm seeing now a huge amount of data across customers. This is my sales agreement data as well as my open pipeline data. And I can do all that kind of what if in comparison. And you can see in this example, we're seeing category and type and other attributes that I can drill into. I'm going to finish up though.
If you just
and let
flash
Maddie
back
kind
for
of
one
wrap
sec,
things up.
Jarrett. Yeah, Jared, just if you flash back to the last screen for
Yes.
just one hot minute, I do want to share, just call everyone's attention that, now it's real time, the data, we have integrity to the data, and I can see like row 9 and 10 that those two accounts are making up a ton of my revenue. If there's any risk on any of those, our whole revenue profile could be at risk. And this is where we can drill in and have a very prescriptive conversation with the sellers to again, return confidence to the process and truly integrate the sales operations planning in a digitized manner. So sorry, I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
No,
'cause I
that was
think it's really
perfect. Again, we kind of flew through this, and you can see again, I can consolidate this. I can make it really simple for me to see next 3 months. I can look at the future. I can pull in historical data. So right, it's back to that. I love what Anandi said of sometimes trying to keep things very simple for your end users. Yes, it's gonna get complex and grow, but sometimes to begin with it can be simple and straightforward to do your manipulation. And then when you need to do some of these other things, you can blow them up or drill down or do whatever you would like. Okay, I am going to stop my share. Maddie, you're on mute.
Yeah, so I think we are on time. So as the part of the next steps, what you can do is, we can get together and, have sort of a lunch and learn sort of session, or more of 1:1 session. The reason is because we would like to understand in terms of the specific challenges related to forecasting S&OP, or, are there any adoption challenges? So that way we can just have a conversation. So please do use this QR code, just scan it, and, we'll happy to jump on a nice lunch near your office so that we can figure out. But thank you, everyone. We are about a minute, but yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. And specifically, thank you, Anandi and Jared, for sharing such amazing insights. And I'll see you soon in the next webinar. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.